Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint by Sing Shong. Chapter 517. Epilogue 1. The World of Zero. Part 1. The panoramic view of the cosmos could be seen beyond the pitch-black window. I rested my forehead against the cold glass and wordlessly stared at that dark world. I couldn't tell how long it had been. I wanted to look back. If I did, then maybe they would still be sitting in their seats even now, so I thought. Kim Dokja finally stopped crying. I didn't cry, you dumbass. He lied, too. Just for how long are you going to stay as the narrator? The story's over now. The fourth wall cackled on. I felt slightly encouraged by that laughter and took another look beyond the window. The ones I wanted to see were no longer reflected on the glass. The planet Earth I used to live had grown distant beyond my reach. Of course, that didn't mean I wasn't there. Avatar skill is currently active. Due to the separation of the world line, the connection to the avatar has been cut off. Your avatar will continue to live his life with its own ego. The me of 49%. The applicable avatar will no longer be under your control. That guy would never realize that he was an avatar. He'd simply live the life of ever after along with the companions as Kim Dokja. High 49%, though ugh? I was trying to divide exactly by 50% each, but it didn't work out. High 49%, though ugh? The exact same question again. It was impossible to hide anything from the fourth wall. You already know why. NOTV Ari Kawaioyu, no, it is exactly like me. Something that the idiotic, immature, and selfish during the crucial moments Kim Dokja would have done. 2%. That number was the proof, and the lie, that I remembered my companions far better than my avatar. Even if no one knew of this version of me existing here, even if the companion stories had come to an end like that. But, at the very least, I swore to myself that I'd never forget about them. You regre ting it. A soft noise came from the clunking subway. I was treated to the view of a completely empty subway interior. The handles no one held on to limply shook about. Don Tfal so lonely I'm not. I slowly regulated my breathing. I had already experienced a similar situation before. It was also like this back when I became the demon king of salvation and fell into the story's horizon. In a way, my situation was better than back then. Well, I wasn't currently suffering from the penalty of leaving the scenario, after all. If there was one thing different from back then, it'd be I'd never be able to meet my companions. Do I have to stay inside this subway forever? Stay? I'm asking if I can go outside. The fourth wall remained silent as if to ponder what I was asking here, before making its reply. There is no concept of access in Tsp La Ce. What do you mean? Tsp La Ce is a sanctum. A P La Ce Whe re the most ancient dream Sle eps. After I heard that, it began to slowly dawn on me. Every world line related to the ways of survival was a dream of the most ancient dream. All the worlds were dreams that were given life in this place. Along with a flash, all the windows of the subway transformed into display screens. At first, I mistook them for the TAS advertisement installed in the special area within the subway network. Scenes from various scenarios were streaming past the windows. Of course, there was no way that I was looking at mere advertisements. Suchuchuchu. A vague migraine assaulted me. The sights of the world lines scattered around the universe were now streaming by. Only then did I gain a new appreciation of just what kind of an existence I had become. He was now the most ancient dream. My shaky steps took me closer to the window. The screen gently trembled like the surface of water, looking fragile enough to be broken at any time I wanted to. Kim Dokja was scared. I didn't need someone to tell me that to know. Every story in this world existed only because a reader read them. If he doesn't watch, the world will come to a stop. Staring at the world and dreaming endlessly. This was the weight the most ancient dream had to bear. I slowly closed my eyes. This was what I chose. And obviously, being able to watch was far better than not being able to. And on top of that, it was the same thing as me having become the ultimate constellation that could peek on every world line out there. So, the fourth wall? WH at. The most ancient dream acted like a constellation, didn't he? Under the guise of a constellation, the previous most ancient dream sent messages during the regression turn I lived in. Although it was the subconscious actions of a child who didn't know anything, there was no denying the fact that such an action nevertheless interfered with the system. Correct. Then, how about me connecting to the world line I lived in as a constellation? Youthing th at yllbpos Cybele. It's not? Not the problem of pos Cybele ity or not. I mulled over what that could mean for a bit, before biting my lip hard. Right, I shouldn't do that. I understand. I recalled all the hardships my companions and I had to experience to reach this conclusion. We fought to eliminate the constellations, and to erase the star stream system. And we succeeded. But for me to revive star stream after coming this far, now that would Luke highly you can't even if you wanted to. Why not? I'm the most ancient dream now, aren't I? If I imagined it, it'd become reality, right? Cant control eve rything just because seyoure the most ancient dream sparks gently danced along with Suchechit. It seemed that the current me couldn't fully exercise the most ancient dream's power to influence. Why our mastery over the dream is end enough. As I thought. If it was that easy to control, then it'd not be called the dream in the first place. I didn't know when it'd be possible, but at least for now, I couldn't do it. I chewed my lips for a little while, before continuing on. In that case, what about just watching? It was right then, something inside me wiggled. The inner me that I couldn't rule over, I sensed this humongous subconsciousness taking root deep within me. This subconsciousness extended its roots towards another world line, and through these roots, began pulling up the stories of this world. My vision darkened, then the sights of the world line spread out like a kaleidoscope. It was the view of the world he missed so much. I thought I saw the distant lights of the industrial complex. Then, I saw the backs of my companions headed there. Not a shade of darkness could be spied on their expressions. In the middle of the group as they walked shoulder to shoulder was another Kim Dokja, kid out in the white coat. I already knew. Even though I knew. My heart crazily pounded away, my breathing getting shallower, faster. I panted heavily and screamed out. I endured the sensation of vomit welling up, shook my head, and opened my eyes. As I felt for the floor while swimming in dizziness, I realized that I was the only one inside the subway. Hats wr all? Do anyone know what ch? I did want to watch. Their happy faces, their expressions of finally escaping from the scenario's hell. I wanted to read the story that I so desperately longed to see. However, I couldn't. If I did, then without a doubt, I'd want to go back. I have to see it, right? If I don't, the world won't move forward, right? Yourelrady what ching what? Subconsciousness is a part of consciousness. Yourlrady what ching the major ity of world lines in that case. No any ed to burden yr's elf, the fourth wall, spoke as if to console me. Youdonth ave to do in youth ing. Yourelrady what ching sub consciously yue. I could just close my eyes and forget everything. It'd be fine to enjoy myself within the dream just like a pure, innocent child with no guilt weighing me down. The fourth wall was telling me that there was absolutely no reason to mull over the tragedy once more and get hurt in the process. However, Kim Dokja wasn't a child. I can't do that, said I, while wiping away the cold sweat. All these world lines were my sin. I created them, and I destroyed them. I must see them. And this was the only way to atone for them. As I slowly stood back up, the world lines appeared on the windows. The countless world lines from the ways of survival, the tragedies of someone, brought to reality because I had read them, were now being displayed there. Perhaps there was something I should see first before seeing the stories of my companions. As if it knew that already, the fourth wall addressed me. YLLBAV Airy Long NIGHT, Kim Dok Ja. I'm sure it'll be. I smiled back. Don't worry. I can do this properly. This is the story that I adore the most, you see. I know I can definitely watch it until my dying day and not get sick of it. But why you me GHTGR out to H8 the ST or ULL the MOST1DI? If that happens, I spoke while reaching towards the scenes appearing within the screen. That will be the price I must pay. I slowly pressed on the glass, and my fingerprints were engraved on the display. The world is now receiving your gaze. A world line has received the power of life from your consciousness. When I reopened my eyes, my body was levitating off the floor, about a handspan high or so. It felt like I was having an out-of-body experience. I was startled by the bustling nearby and looked around to discover a crowd of people. They walked right into me and past me as if I was invisible to them. Every one of these tired faces belonged to the office workers on their way home. This place. I scanned my vicinity and saw the orange color denoting the subway's third line. Surprisingly enough, I found myself floating above the subway platform. The current time and all sorts of subway-related information were displayed on the LED screens installed on the ceiling. 6:55 p.m. Exactly 5 minutes before the beginning of the scenario. Soon enough, the Bulgwang station-bound train arrived along with the noisy announcement. People climbed aboard the train one by one. I'd have stopped them if only I could. However, nothing would change even if I did. The scenario would begin regardless of where you were, anyway. All I could do now was to climb aboard the train along with them and watch all these tragedies unfold. And a face Kim Dok Ja was intimately familiar with was their dot. The Bulgwang station-bound train number 3434, the car number 3707. A certain man absent-mindedly staring outside the subway window was there. After observing his face for a little while, I ended up smirking a little. When I thought about it, it was pretty obvious. In the end, all these world lines were repeated through one man's regressions. So, it was only obvious that I'd encounter this fool at the beginning of the story. This world's protagonist. Quite obviously, Yu Young-hyuk failed to sense my presence. No, his disinterested gaze remained locked on the outside of the subway, his mind currently submerged in his thoughts. A face that remained calm even when knowing that the scenarios were about to begin. I had no choice but to be impressed by that. You're really an amazing guy, aren't you? I had already witnessed the end of the scenarios, but my skin still trembled simply by re-entering the scene. Yet, you managed to endure these moments dozens, hundreds of times. The stopped subway train began moving and the time flowed forward once more. That thing should begin soon, if my knowledge served me correctly. During the third turn, Yu Young-hyuk would begin by killing everyone within this subway car. I recalled the beginning of the third turn that I knew of. I wasn't sure which regression turn this was, but the beginning wouldn't be so different from that. I slowly scanned the surroundings and spotted a man acting suspiciously by the exit. Hugh. Several people shifted their gazes over to the man after hearing his intermittent grunts. The man carrying a twisted expression sniggered and looked around himself, then suddenly, pulled out a homemade bomb and a lighter. On that day when the paywall began, there was a certain man riding on the same subway car number 3707 as Yu Young-hyuk. What's that? Hey, man. The subway terrorist, Choi Hong-gyu. The shocked crowd screamed and retreated. People freaked out after witnessing the sparks exploding from the man's hands and stood up from their seats, causing the scene to turn chaotic. As for Yu Young-hyuk, he was quietly staring at that man. Hey, what are you doing? Hurry up and snatch that away. According to the storyline I knew, Yu Young-hyuk should have suppressed Choi Hong-gyu the moment they climbed aboard the subway and took away the bomb. However, he hadn't done that. Why was this? Yu Young-hyuk's expression, the one I thought was calmness personified, was now pale white in fright. It was then, the interior of the train became dark along with the screeching noise. People's screams morphed into sorrowful cries as they witnessed the flame being lit up within the darkness. Something had gone awry here. Why isn't Yu Young-hyuk making his move? Hang on a minute, could this be 7 p.m.? And then, as the tick noise resounded out, the world's rules changed. The free service period of the planetary system number 8612 has concluded. Main scenario has begun. The flames lit up by the terrorist brightly illuminated Yu Young-hyuk's face, his eyes trembling in pure fear. He stood there, unable to do anything. I too had fallen into a bout of panic. Pages of the ways of survival began flipping inside my head. Just which regression turn was this? Was this around the 900th, when he lost his mind? Or around the 1200th? During which regression turn was this half-wit Yu Young-hyuk? Channel hashtag B7623 has opened. Constellations are entering. Hugh. The crowd began running towards the next car of the train, away from the figure of the terrorist clutching the explosive as the man's eyes glared at the surroundings. Extremely small number of constellations are getting interested in incarnation Choi Hongyu. And Yu Young-hyuk was still standing in the same spot. The one I knew would never react like this. No, Yu Young-hyuk was someone who'd resort to the perfect showmanship to suppress the situation from the get-go. But now, he was making this stupid face that I had never seen before under the terrorist's threat. One I had never seen before. Never seen. It felt like a lightning bolt had gone off in my head. So, that's what this was, this storyline. Countless pages flipped inside my head, before the book itself was closed shut. This was the regression turn that got treated as nothing more than a passing reminiscence back in the ways of survival. Some stories would actually begin from a moment that wasn't written. Please, don't kill me. Aok. This story is the unknown beginning of the ways of survival. This world line was the one that I didn't get to read, Yu Young-hyuk's 0th turn. Chapter 518. Epilogue 1. The World of Zero. Part 2. Yu Young-hyuk was reading the article of a portal site on a person's phone next to him. Pro gamer Yu Young-hyuk, for how long will he stay under the radar? Several private matters that other people didn't know, such as discord between the teammates and the tyranny caused by the director's high-handedness, brushed past his mind. However, they were stories from years ago, and he couldn't think of an answer, no matter how hard he thought about them. We found their home address. That text message appeared on his smartphone. It was from the detective agency he hired, letting him know that his parents had been located. This was the reason why he decided to step outside the house for the first time in a while. Yu Young-hyuk wished to know about his origins. To find out who gave birth to him, and who had abandoned him. To find out who left behind a little sister in his care when he was on a fast track to success. Yu Young-hyuk also desperately wanted to find out. Did people like that live here before? I don't know, either. It's been too long. Even though he spent a considerable sum to hire the detective agency, the only thing he got in return was an address of an empty house. The agency told him that there was nothing more they could find out. His parents were gone without a trace, as if they had evaporated from this world. How could such a thing happen, though? 28-year-old Yu Young-hyuk seemed to exist all alone, without being able to recall a single memory concerning his parents, or anything nostalgic from his childhood. As if he was a being crafted to be an adult from the moment he was born. As he rode in this noisily clunking subway of the third line, Yu Young-hyuk was facing a philosophical quandary for the first time ever in his life. Just who am I? And that was why he didn't react in time. You are. He noticed the ruckus only after a short while later. A giant of a man, with a scraggly beard on his chin, the homemade explosive device clutched in his hand, and the cogged wheel of the lighter turning with pronounced tick, tick. Only after someone smacked past his shoulder did he awake to this surreal situation. The terror. The lights in the subway went away the next second. The train came to a sudden emergency stop, and the surroundings rapidly filled up with darkness. Yu Young-hyuk felt all the hair on his arms stand up. The inside of his head felt dizzy. Was this really an act of terror? Something that he'd only ever heard about was really happening in South Korea, too? Where should he evacuate to? Should the police be notified? Or, welcome, everyone. Nice to meet you. Yu Young-hyuk's dilemmas were carefully extinguished by a small CGI-like lump suddenly appearing in midair. It's getting tiring to make the same introduction over and over again, but... Anyway, this situation isn't a movie shoot, nor is it a terror incident. Ing? These creatures would later introduce themselves as Dakibis. That unknown existence floating in the air observed the situation within the train and broke out into a wide smile. What's this? Ha 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 ha. Dear constellations, please take a look over here. The scenarios haven't even begun yet, but something entertaining is already underway. The Dakibi spoke in a languid but cruel tone of voice and laughed. I'm already beginning to look forward to this particular car. I pray that you'll all show us an entertaining tale. Main scenario has arrived. Plus. Main scenario number 1, proof of worth type, main. Difficulty, F. Clear condition, please kill one or more life forms. Time limit, 30 minutes. Reward, 300 coins. Failure, death. Plus. And hell began from then. Asterisk. Baehyung, that fool. He was rather adorable back then. There used to be a moment like that in the past, didn't it? While listening to the screams resounding out within the subway, I fell into a bit of ill-timed reminiscence. Are you saying you want to sign the stream contract with me? It felt like only yesterday that I met the guy for the first time and discussed getting into an exclusive contract with him. Back then, I really got lucky. If I failed to sign the contract, then... Kim Dokja. You and I aren't comrades. Then, Baehyung wouldn't have died on that day. I actually wanted to witness your fable till its end, though. Maybe, Yu Young-hyuk trembling over there might get to feel this sentiment after going through over 1,000 regressions. Scenario? What is that? The passengers of the car number 3707 began murmuring after receiving their very first scenario. Desperate struggles taking place in other locations were then broadcast on the panels in the air of the scenario where if you didn't kill, you'd be killed instead. A G game. This is a game. The terrorist Choi Hongyu was shouting out. Ha 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 ha. Choi Hongyu, the terrorist. Information regarding him appeared once in the Ways of Survival via Yu Young-hyuk's reminiscence. If Choi Hongyu manages to survive, he'll evolve into demonic bomber at a later stage. Choi Hongyu pulled out a hammer from his side and proceeded to hit the back of a middle-aged man's head right next to him. The victim's knees powerlessly buckled. If I do this. Incarnation Choi Hongyu has achieved the feat of first murder. Choi Hongyu began his awakening as he stared at the coins raining down before him. Just like how it always had been, the ones that adapted fastest to Starstream were those that couldn't adapt to the real world. Did you all see that? Just now? Murderer. He's a murderer. Choi Hongyu watched the crowd freak out and retreat away from him, and tilted his head. Why are you all not doing anything? Why you're all making me look like T the Strange One. Don't come near me. And maybe, you need this? He smirked towards the crowd, and then suddenly, chucked several tools hanging on his sides, towards them. He then wielded the spanner once more, and slammed down on the back of the already dead man. It's easy. L like this. You do it L like this, and then, sprays of sticky bloody rose up from the back of the man. Then, everyone can become rich. The timer in the air was ticking down, bit by bit. Remaining time has decreased. Remaining time, 10 minutes. Yu Young-hyuk wordlessly stared at the spanner that rolled towards his feet. Even then, the crowd showed no signs of movement. Choi Hongyu shook his head as if he was disappointed, and stood up from his spot. Should I just kill everyone? But then, a man suddenly reached out and grabbed hold of a hammer that Choi Hongyu had thrown. Fuck this. I don't know anymore. Juicy. What are you doing? This man gripped tight the thrown spanner and began attacking everyone next to him indiscriminately. This was the car number 3707 that Yu Young-hyuk managed to survive. Forgive me. I'm sorry. Yuwa. As voices futilely spread out, people began waking up to the new reality. They couldn't tell what kind of a situation this was, but they were sure of one thing. They'll die if they don't kill each other. Extremely small number of constellations are satisfied by the sight of the applicable subway car. Extremely small number of constellations are expressing their interest in incarnation, Choi Hongyu. A constellation who hasn't revealed their modifier is sponsoring incarnation, Choi Hongyu, with 100 coins. Choi Hongyu was laughing in satisfaction at the crowd. I slowly removed my hand from Choi Hongyu's neck. I know already, so don't worry. I must not change this story. Everything happening now was events that have already happened. I looked at Yu Young-hyuk. He was bending down to pick up a spanner that came from Choi Hongyu's possession. I could vividly feel the deep conflict he was in from his expression. It was an expression of a man who had chosen to take a life. But, why was this? That expression was different from the Yu Young-hyuk that I knew. The one that I knew would gnash his teeth from someone's betrayal, Yu Young-hyuk, who didn't trust others easily nor easily made comrades. Yu Young-hyuk, who always pursued after the most optimal route, and didn't hesitate killing others ahead of time if they were going to betray him later. That was why the third turn Yu Young-hyuk could slaughter the fellow passengers of the same subway. However, this Yu Young-hyuk before my eyes wasn't from the third turn. Not from the fourth, not fifth, and definitely not from the 1863rd either. He was the 0th turn. Yu Young-hyuk of the 0th turn. His feet broke into a sprint. His feet that couldn't use either the Red Phoenix Shuanpa nor Ways of the Wind yet. There were plenty of targets present. A trembling college student hurtled on the floor, a middle-aged man hiding next to the disabled seating, an office worker, too absorbed in assaulting the others and not having enough time to look behind. Yu Young-hyuk ran past all of them. And then, he selected the hardest opponent within this subway car as his target. Hugh. Choi Hongyu smiled insidiously while observing the spanner flying in. He took an agile step back to evade, then an ultra-sharp survival knife jumped out from his waist. Along with the swish noise, Yu Young-hyuk dodged the blade with nary a gap to spare. Why did Yu Young-hyuk make this choice? I couldn't tell. Why did this guy, frightened out of his mind, make such a choice? Choi Hongyu still carried several other tools, and not only that, he was in possession of a homemade explosive, as well. On the other hand, all Yu Young-hyuk had was a spanner as thick as a child's arm. Even then, I wasn't worried. Although I didn't know the finer details of the 0th turn, Yu Young-hyuk wouldn't die in this place. Not before he got to experience all these tragedies, and not before they led him to that vast cycle of regressions. Yu Young-hyuk wouldn't get killed. Incarnation Yu Young-hyuk's attribute, Pro Gamer, is awakening. He was awakening his exclusive attribute, the one that I was quite familiar with. It was a skill that allowed him to digitize everything in this world like a video game and analyze them. A skill to control his body, as if he was moving his game avatar. His spanner accurately struck Choi Hongyu's wrist. The bomber screamed out for a moment as the homemade explosive fell out from his grasp. Yu Young-hyuk's spanner then accurately flew in towards the neck of flustered Choi Hongyu next. It was an unavoidable attack, a perfect counter that his talent had calculated. Unfortunately, even he had failed to take into account this one thing. Incarnation Choi Hongyu is investing 900 coins to stamina. And that was precisely the system of this new world. That hurts. Although a dark red mark was left behind on Choi Hongyu's neck, it wasn't broken. His muscles swelled, and he grabbed Yu Young-hyuk by the neck. The latter's complexion paled greatly as he dangled up in the air. While grabbing hold of his victim's collars, Choi Hongyu's free hand picked up another hammer. Die. Right in that moment, Yu Young-hyuk saw the fallen homemade bomb on the floor. And I realized what he was thinking of. Yu Young-hyuk throwing the spanner in his hand, and I making my move, happened simultaneously. The time flow slowed down greatly. The slowly flying spanner was accurately heading towards the center of the homemade bomb. I quietly stared at this spectacle. Even if that thing went off, Yu Young-hyuk wouldn't die. That simply had to be, if what I read was correct. But, why was this? Why were my hands shaking so much like this? The fourth wall. After hearing the air making the tsuchechit noise, I continued on. Does Yu Young-hyuk's sponsor exist in this world? He exists. The most ancient dream existed in this world. The being that became the most ancient dream much earlier than me, the younger version of myself. Or, something that was presumably my younger version. If that's the case, why can't I sense anything? That's what's been bothering me. I could sense everything in this world. Everything in the scenarios, including individual incarnations, all the way to the constellations, blanketing the heavens above. However, I failed to sense just this one thing. Where's the most ancient dream right now? The fourth wall didn't answer me. Yu Young-hyuk's spinning spanner flew in, and was about to reach the homemade explosive. Could it be? How did the most ancient dream manage to form a contract with the 0th turns Yu Young-hyuk? All those questions simmering away inside my head until now were going off all at once. The most ancient dream dreams through the ways of survival. Indeed, the younger version of me imagined this world while reading The Ways of Survival. And The Ways of Survival was a story that started off from Yu Young-hyuk's third regression turn. So, could he even properly imagine The Ways of Survival's 0th turn? Was he even capable of picturing a story not mentioned in the original, a world that he hadn't read before? If that's the case, then just who was the constellation sponsor that appeared during Yu Young-hyuk's 0th turn? The bomb exploded. The shower of debris flying out stabbed into Choi Hongyu's back, then into the bodies of people busy hacking away at each other. Accompanied by a loud screeching noise, the subway's ceiling was caving in. Several pieces of debris were flying straight towards Yu Young-hyuk's heart and neck. Tsuchechit. You're the owner of the final wall. Your mastery isn't sufficient enough to interfere with the world line. The world line's probability is resisting you. I ignored the probability and caught the flying debris. Along with the vicious heat enveloping my hand, the debris scattered into ashes in my palm. A deus ex machina the world line doesn't recognize is activating. The world has sensed your interference. Right at that moment, Yu Young-hyuk raised his head. Yu Young-hyuk crawled out from underneath the collapsed Choi Hongyu and stared at me. Although it was for the briefest of brief moments, Yu Young-hyuk felt that there was someone standing before him. Who? Main scenario number 1, proof of worth has concluded. You have acquired the normal clear reward of 300 coins. 100 coins have been deducted as the channel usage fee. Additional reward calculation has commenced. Along with the scenario calculations, the heads of the people began exploding. And as the deluge of blood rained down, I silently looked at Yu Young-hyuk on the floor. Bai Hyung's excited voice coming from the distance, as well as the fourth wall's words of warning, could be heard next. Even the messages of constellations suspecting the probability streamed in, too. In the meantime, Yu Young-hyuk was staring at the message spreading out before him with quaking eyes. Sponsor selection is commencing. Plus. Sponsor selection. Please select your sponsor. The backer you choose will become your trusty sponsor. 1. God of wine and ecstasy. 2. Mouse that eats fingernails. 3. Abyssal Black Flame Dragon. Plus. A new constellation has entered the channel. A new constellation is participating in the sponsor selection. Plus. 4. Demon King of Salvation. Plus. Chapter 519. Epilogue 1. The World of Zero. Part 3. Currently, the applicable regression turn is under the overwrite restriction. Currently, the applicable world line's copyright holder is absent. As the owner of the final wall, you can act as the substitute copyright holder. Will you activate overwrite to interfere with the worldview? The warning messages floated up one after the other in the empty air. Almost at the same time, the fourth wall's voice entered my ears. Kim Dok-ja. I know already, so stop trying to scare me. I could already tell what the fourth wall was going to say. Probably, it'd be something along the line of there's no meaning in changing the predetermined past. I sensed a certain glare squarely locking onto me from the empty air, but I tried my best to ignore that. Although I had no clue how the original 0th turn unfolded, if the paragraph I read in passing inside the fourth wall's library was true, then the 0th turn Ji Young-hyuk shouldn't select his backer until much later. He would lose Lee Seol-hwa and Lee Ji-hae during this turn. He'd lose the ones precious to him, those he barely managed to meet, and then, he'd desperately think about this one thing as his death approached him. If only I had a sponsor, what could it have been like? I stared at Yu Young-hyuk as he read the system messages with quaking eyes. Through this turn, his cycle of regression would begin. He'd get to repeat countless regressions, and thereby walk on the hellscape of eternity. Even if You Cha and Get's turn. The past that the secretive plotter lived through won't disappear. I know that. Even if I changed this world line, the predetermined tragedies would still happen. The Yu Young-hyuk I know would live through the first, second, third, and eventually, all the way to 1863rd regression turns. He'd become the secretive plotter, and start hating me. However, even if that was the case, I can't pick up any traces of the most ancient dream that isn't me in this regression turn. It was quite likely that the cause of this event was the younger me not knowing anything about Ji Young-hyuk's 0th turn. Whatever the case might have been, one thing's for certain, at the very least, I could take on that role during this world line. I could become Yu Young-hyuk's sponsor during this world line. YLLYOU ma kuhim re gress. The fourth wall asked as if it was intrigued. I shook my head. No. I'll make sure he doesn't. Even if he's chainged, the futur won't. I know. That's why I feel even more relieved. The past I changed wouldn't deny the Yu Young-hyuk I know of. If Yu Young-hyuk got to experience a regression turn that wasn't tragic, even if it's just once. I slowly extended my hand towards the air. Overwrite has commenced. Interfering with the applicable worldview has begun. As your mastery over the dream is insufficient, currently it's impossible to interfere too aggressively. As the sparks exploded with a loud "su-cha-cha-chut," messages popped up one after the other. The Demon King of Salvation is registering his temporary constellation name. You're currently participating in the sponsor selection as a constellation. Starstream's system is suspicious of your eligibility. Low-grade Dakibi Baihyung finds your modifier unfamiliar. Small number of constellations are flustered by your sudden entrance. I bit down on my lip while observing Yu Young-hyuk's pale expression. This might prove to be a bad decision. Yu Young-hyuk might end up even more miserable because I changed this world line. However, if it was the me of right now, Hoare, the Demon King of Salvation? Well now, a new constellation Nim has decided to enter the stage. If it was Kim Dok-ja, the most ancient dream, who had witnessed the end of one world and had the knowledge of the scenario's epilogues, then wouldn't it be possible to change the predetermined destiny? Looks like we might need to extend the time since the candidates have increased. Baihyung updated the message floating in midair. Sponsor selection time period has been extended by 5 minutes. The survivors in the near vicinity, having somehow lived through that ordeal, began opening their mouths, one by one. Just what is all this? Sponsor selection, is it? I didn't find it weird since I had read The Ways of Survival before, but still, I could guess how confused they must feel after facing a situation like this for the first time ever. Incarnation Yu Young-hyuk is activating his attribute. In the midst of all this, only Yu Young-hyuk was regaining his cool. His calm eyes were proof of that. Well, I'm getting curious about what he's thinking here, so. Exclusive skill, Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint LV, is activating. Although I felt a bit sorry about taking a peek inside the feeble 0th turn's head, I simply had to look this time. What if, in a 1 in a million chance, he chose a different backer, then? You are the most ancient dream. You can utilize 100% of your skill's abilities regardless of your understanding on the target. The inside of Yu Young-hyuk's head spread out like an anatomy chart. What about Mia? What happened to her? I must rescue Mia. In order to do that, I must get through this selection thing before my eyes first. Backer selection. Sounds like I must pick my sponsor. I grew slightly tense. During the original 0th turn, this guy apparently didn't choose anyone as his backer this early on, but that'd always be nothing more than a story from the original. No one could tell what might happen this time. Unexpectedly though, it wasn't Yu Young-hyuk displaying his interest in me, but other constellations. Constellation, God of Wine and Ecstasy, is greeting you. Constellation, God of Wine and Ecstasy, thinks your modifier is a cool one. It seemed that Dionysus's outgoing personality was the same regardless of the regression turns. If he didn't yield to us back in the final arc, the ensuing battle would have been so much harder. Just as I was about to greet him back, someone else butted in. Constellation, Abyssal Black Flame Dragon is keeping his eyes on you. Now that I thought about it, this dude was also here, wasn't he? Hey, you, aren't you supposed to be eyeing Kim Nam-woon in the next subway car? Just how many bridges are you planning to straddle here? Constellation, Abyssal Black Flame Dragon, thinks you are copying from his modifier. I was about to ask just which part sounded the same to him, but in the end, held back. Only 3 minutes remained, no need to waste my energy on something completely unnecessary. I shifted my head to discover that Yu Young-hyuk had begun considering his choices earnestly. I swallowed back my nervous saliva. Plus 1, God of Wine and Ecstasy. Plus. Yu Young-hyuk stared at that modifier for a little while before shifting his gaze away. Something feels messy about that name. Soon after, his eyes landed on the second candidate. Plus 2, Mouse that eats fingernails. Plus. I grew nervous when he stared at that modifier for quite a long time. Wake up, Yu Young-hyuk. You'd be better off choosing the Abyssal Black Flame Dragon instead of this. Sounds weak. I barely managed to breathe a sigh of relief. Damn it, man. Stop making people nervous. Yu Young-hyuk then stared at the third candidate afterwards. Plus 3, Abyssal Black Flame Dragon. Plus. Although obvious, Yu Young-hyuk would never choose the third option. He might seem drunk on his awesomeness outwardly, but in truth, he wasn't a fan of such flashy and grand-sounding words. That's why. That's a fairly strong-sounding name. Wah. Hang on a. Maybe, it might be an unexpectedly powerful sponsor. It's true that he's powerful, but. That guy, he makes his incarnations recite weird summoning spells, you know? Hey, Young-hyuk, please open your eyes properly and take a closer look. The only ones that can handle this guy are Kim Nam-woon or Han Soo-young, that's it. Constellation, Abyssal Black Flame Dragon, is boasting in your direction. 1 minute remaining until the conclusion of the sponsor selection. And finally, Yu Young-hyuk's eyes landed on the fourth candidate. Plus 4, Demon King of Salvation. Plus. I barely managed to calm my mind and along with Yu Young-hyuk, looked at the backer selection list from behind him. The god of wine and ecstasy, mouse that eats fingernails, abyssal black flame dragon, and the demon king of salvation. The fourth wall, what do you think? As if it didn't get the intention behind the question, the fourth wall took its time answering back. What I'm asking you is, who sounds strongest to you? It is. Not including the actual combat prowess, just judging from the modifiers alone. I thought that a reply should be forthcoming pretty quickly, but it seemed that the fourth wall was actually in a dilemma here. I didn't wait and spoke up first. Not saying this because I'm the demon king of salvation, but in truth, and also, objectively speaking. Hang on, no need to look at it objectively, either. Just think about it logically. The god of wine and ecstasy? He simply sounded like a drunkard. The mouse that eats fingernails? You weren't looking for a nail clipper substitute, so what would you even need this guy for? The abyssal black flame dragon? Just one look, and you should know not to choose this guy. Even if the 0th turned Yu Young Hyuk was an idiot, he should not be making such mistakes. The only normal-sounding modifier was mine. And for sure, he raised his finger and pointed at the fourth option as if he was impressed by my modifier. Then, he began thinking. What an arrogant-sounding name. Weaklings often use names like this. Even before I could shout something out, Yu Young Hyuk shot up from his spot and spoke. I've made up my mind. I will. As he formed a triumphant grin, his lips slowly parted. I silently stared at the subway's ceiling. Accompanied by the tsuchachachut noise, vicious heat burned on my hand. You're interfering in the world line. Override has commenced. Excessive interference might cause the world line to strongly resist. I used all of my strength to smack the back of Yu Young Hyuk's head. Asterisk. Hiohik. Kim Dokja woke up from the powerful impact on the back of his head. How long are you planning to sleep? Wake up already. He opened his eyes and found Han Soo-young lightly dusting her hands. He then wiped away the drool marks on the couch and gingerly sat back up. What's this? Why am I here? Okay, so. What are you doing? Hurry up and get ready already. Did you forget where we're supposed to go today? Yu Young Hyuk, standing in his trademark pose, was standing next to Han Soo-young, his eyes still blazing non-stop. You're making us wait for no reason, he said. It wasn't just him, though. Jong Hui-won's head peeked out from behind Yu Young Hyuk, and the figure of Lee Hyun-sung carrying an armful of something could be seen behind her. Is that pizza? It's fried chicken, you dummy. Shin Yu-sung and Lee Gil-young were swallowing their saliva as they continued to stare at Lee Hyun-sung's plastic bags. And finally, Lee Ji-hai standing next to these two children, too. Hurry up and let's go. I'm starving. Kim Dokja saw the spectacle and finally remembered what today was. This world scenario had ended. When he turned his head, he saw warm rays of sunlight seeping through the industrial complex S windows. And today was Kim Dokja Company's first field trip. Asterisk. As they made their ways towards their destination, Han Soo-young continued to grumble away. Hey, Kim Dokja. What now? You didn't really forget what day is today, right? What day is it? It's December 25th. What day do you think it was? Kim Dokja pondered for a little bit before replying to her. The day Mitra was born? Is that supposed to be Veda-style humor? They continued walking while exchanging banter like that. Every so often, Yu Young Hyuk let out a pained groan as if they were getting on his nerves. It was around then that a red sports car came to a stop on the side of the road while making a loud noise. Sang-ah SSI. Jong Hui-won was first to recognize Yu Sang-ah and quickly raised her hand. The latter, kitted out in a white long padded coat and a pair of jeans, took off her sunglasses and replied back. I'm so sorry, the filming took longer than I thought. Perhaps finding the current Yu Sang-ah not to her liking, Han Soo-young verbally tackled her down right away. Oh, my? You sure are a full-fledged celeb nowadays, aren't you? Do we really need to eat by the Han River when it's so cold outside? Is there anyone here without cold resistance? I mean, you should still have that sort of a skill remaining, right? We could have just eaten back in the complex, though. As it's Christmas, there should be quite a few people by the river, too. We made a promise with the kids. While watching the two of them bickering away, Kim Dokja felt a certain corner of his heart ache for some reason. Why did this sight feel so nostalgic to him? It had already been 3 months since the scenarios came to an end, so. What about Seolwa SSI and Pildu SSI? I can't see the department head Han either. They'll be here. Ah, there they are. OIAA. Seolwa. Right in front of the UNR station, Seolwa, wearing a white fur coat, was waving both of her hands with a bright smile. And next to her was Gong Pildu, staring in another direction with a cantankerous expression. You didn't want to show up for so long that we thought you forgot about us again. Perhaps she felt guilty after hearing that, Jong Huiwon quickly replied. There's no way that's true, though. But, you did abandon us and return to the industrial complex first, didn't you? We did go back to find you later, didn't we? What do you mean, find us? We only were able to come back because the librarians let us leave. Seriously, if I look back to that time, I still. What about Han Myong-o? Myong-o SSI didn't come, saying that he must spend Christmas with his family. What family does that Ajusi even have? Ah. The companions continued to walk forward under the noisy, festive atmosphere. Lee Gilyong and Shin Yusung clung onto each of Kim Dokja's arms and growled towards one another. Hey, you. Stop pulling him to your side. You too. By the way, Ajusi, you think Santa Claus is a constellation, too? The group eventually reached the Han River Public Park. Maybe the cold weather was to blame, as there weren't all that many people visible here. What was visible, though, were the collapsed bridges of the river, as well as the pitch-black night sky. Only an extremely few stars remained as proof of star stream existing up there once before. Without a doubt, everything did come to an end. The group laid a mat on the ground and installed a portable stove next to the children. Yu Young-hyuk then placed a picnic table next to the stove and proceeded to make something with Ji-hai. Kim Dokja asked. What's this, we're going to make them here? Of course. There are no fried chicken takeaways or pizzeria remaining, so obviously we have to make our own, right? He thought about it and realized that's true. It had been only 3 months since the end of the scenarios, so pizzerias or takeaways couldn't have been revived already. Han Soo-young carried on. Be grateful that we have someone who can make them for us. Chicken drumsticks dismantled in an instant flew in the air, and Yu Young-hyuk's special sauces danced enticingly just above them. Rolled dough spun vigorously at the end of the scabbard, too. It was uncertain whether he was making a pizza or fried chicken, but without a doubt, something amazing was being created right now. In the end, a day like today did come, said Yu Sang-ah as she sat on the mat with her knees pulled up close. Her eyes were staring at the Han River, as if she was submerged in reminiscence. Kim Dokja addressed her. You must be really busy nowadays. It's just. Yes, I am. There are lots of things to take care of, so. It had only been 3 months since the scenarios ended. The society at large hadn't regained its stability yet. The system's influence hadn't completely disappeared yet, and the criminals retaining their skills or stigmata continued with their crime sprees even now. Yu Sang-ah was this world's hero that defeated them and protected ordinary citizens. They looked so good together. In a spot far away, Jong Hui-won and Lee Hyun-sung were standing together to look at the Han River. Han Soo-young pouted and spat out her words. I bet 100 coins that they won't last a year. It was right then, they heard something exploding in the distance. The startled companions instinctively reached towards their individual weapons. But when they took a closer look, the explosion noise came from the fireworks fired from a distant building. Someone's using stuff like that already? Han Soo-young muttered out in disbelief. Kim Dokja stared at that spectacle with renewed interest. Fireworks, was it? He never expected to see them again in his life. Bit by bit, the aroma of their food getting ready wafted in. Kim Dokja. Ing? You know, you haven't been reading that thing recently. What do you mean? Kim Dokja thought about it for a second before making his reply. Ah, that's right. I should be reading it, though. He hurriedly switched his smartphone on. However, its battery was flat and the device refused to power on. Han Suyang's figure was reflected on the dark screen. It was still impossible to get a bead on her inner thoughts through the look in her eyes. She wordlessly observed Kim Dokja and muttered something to herself, before plopping down next to him with an oopsie. Maybe I shouldn't have bothered to come. All these useless thoughts are making my head hurt, instead. Ing? Nah, just talking to myself. Never mind that, though, there was a part like this back in the Ways of Survival, wasn't it? You remember that? The Ways of Survival. You know, the third turn Jiyonghayak. Everyone together, next to the Han River, chewing on the ground rat's legs. Kim Dokja's expression as he listened to her words distorted in a strange, vague manner. She reached out to him as he began to wobble a little. Hey, what's the matter? You alright? You feeling sick somewhere? It's just that my head hurts without warning. Did I smack you a little too hard back then? How about resting for a bit? No, it's fine. Besides all that. You're right. About what? About the Ways of Survival. I really like that scene, too. It's the scene I like the most from the third regression turn. Han Suyang deeply stared into Kim Dokja's face, before forming a refreshing grin. Really now, you Ways of Survival otaku freak. Another round of fireworks went off in the distance, much larger in scale this time. The children let out a loud cheer as they witnessed the beautiful flames engraving the night sky. Kim Dokja began thinking, maybe this was the sight he'd been yearning to see for the longest time. For the longest. Han Suyang opened her lips again. By the way, Kim Dokja? Ing? Since from when was this? Her face was pushed real close to his. Her pristine, perfectly set facial features, her pale white cheeks, and a beauty spot just below her sparkling eyes. Kim Dokja became flustered by the faint hint of lemony scent reaching his nose. Just before he could say something, though, Han Suyang approached him even closer. She brought her lips to his ear and slowly whispered in a clear voice. Such a scene doesn't appear in the third turn of Ways of Survival. Along with the fireworks scattering in the sky, it felt as if a powerful shower of sparks were raining down from somewhere. Kim Dokja thought that his vision was flipped around for some reason, only to realize that he was currently thrown onto the ground unceremoniously. Hey, you! Han Suyang's icy-cold venomous eyes were right before him now. Everything was definitely over, yet. Why did it feel like nothing was over somehow? Zhang Huiwen and Yi Hyansong running over here from the distance could be seen. Then, the expressionless face of Yu Yonghayak, and finally, even the world where all the stories had concluded, too. Under the fireworks brightly dyeing the night sky, Han Suyang's chilly, sharp dagger gleamed dangerously. You, just who the hell are you?